The iron beast of the Union Pacific Railroad cut through the endless prairie like a knife through butter, its black smoke rising into the pale September sky of 1883. Inside one of the passenger cars, Lena Whitmore pressed her face against the window, watching the landscape transform from the familiar eastern forests to the stark, unforgiving plains of Wyoming Territory. Her gloved hands clutched a worn leather satchel containing everything she owned in this world: 2 dresses, a daguerreotype of her late mother, and the letter that had changed her life. 3 months ago, she had answered an advertisement in the Boston Herald. Respectable widower, owner of substantial cattle ranch in Wyoming Territory, seeks companionable woman of good character for matrimony. Must be willing to work hard and embrace frontier life. The correspondence that followed with Caleb Drummond had been brief but promising. His letters spoke of vast skies, honest work, and a chance to build something meaningful far from the suffocating judgment of Eastern society. Lena touched the bruise on her wrist, now faded to yellow, the last gift from her former employer's son, whose advances she had refused once too often. Boston held nothing for her anymore. Her parents had died of consumption 2 winters past, leaving debts that consumed their modest shop. She had worked as a seamstress until the incident that destroyed her reputation. No decent family would employ her after young Theodore Hartwell spread his vicious lies. Marriage to a stranger 3,000 miles away seemed not just an escape, but perhaps salvation. The train lurched to a stop at a station that barely deserved the name. A wooden platform surrounded by nothing but sagebrush and distant mountains. The conductor called out, "Willow Springs," and Lena's heart hammered against her corset stays. This was it. She gathered her courage along with her belongings and stepped down into the harsh Wyoming sunlight. The heat struck her like a physical blow after the cool dimness of the train car. Dust swirled around her black traveling dress, and she squinted against the glare. A few ramshackle buildings lined what passed for a main street, and beyond them stretched an emptiness so vast it made her dizzy. Miss Whitmore. She turned to find a weather-beaten man in his 50s, hat in hand. His face was carved by wind and sun into deep grooves, but his eyes were kind. "I'm Samuel Morrison, Mr. Drummond's foreman. He sent me to fetch you." His voice carried a note of something she couldn't quite identify. Sorrow, uncertainty. "The wagon's this way, ma'am." As Samuel loaded her trunk, Lena noticed how he avoided meeting her eyes. The journey to the ranch took 3 hours over rutted trails that rattled her teeth and coated everything in fine dust. Samuel remained mostly silent, responding to her attempts at conversation with grunts or single syllables. The Drummond ranch emerged from the landscape like a mirage, a cluster of buildings surrounded by wooden fences, with cattle dotting the distant hills. The main house was larger than she'd expected, 2 stories of solid timber with a wide porch. But something was wrong. Black crepe hung from the door, and several wagons stood in the yard. "Mr. Morrison?" Lena's voice came out as a whisper. "What's happened?" The foreman's weathered face crumpled. "I'm sorry, Miss, I wanted to send word, but Mr. Drummond, he weren't thinking straight. It's Mrs. Drummond, ma'am, Rachel. She passed 3 days ago." The world tilted. Lena gripped the wagon seat. But Mr. Drummond is a widower. His letters said—" "No, ma'am. His first wife died in childbirth 8 years back. Rachel was his second wife. They married 2 years ago." Samuel helped her down from the wagon, his calloused hand steady under her elbow. "There was an accident. Her horse spooked during a storm. She fell bad, broke her neck." People in mourning clothes milled about the porch. Through the open door, Lena glimpsed a pine coffin surrounded by wildflowers. The reality crashed over her like a cold wave. She had traveled 3,000 miles to marry a man whose wife's body was not yet in the ground. "Where is Mr. Drummond?" she managed. "I'll fetch him. Ma'am, you wait here." But she didn't have to wait long. The crowd parted, and a man emerged from the house. Caleb Drummond was nothing like she'd imagined from his letters. Tall and broad-shouldered, yes, but his dark hair was unkempt. His face haggard with grief and probably whiskey. His blue eyes, when they fixed on her, blazed with an anger that made her step backward. "You—" His voice was raw, scraped hollow. "Why are you here?" "Mr. Drummond, your letter said to come. I'm Lena Whitmore. We corresponded about—" "Get out!" The words came out flat, deadly. "Get back on that train and go back to wherever you came from." "Sir, Lena straightened her spine, finding steel she didn't know she possessed. "I sold everything I owned for this journey. I have nowhere to return to. That's not my problem." He swayed slightly, and she caught the sharp scent of alcohol. "My wife is dead. Dead! And you show up like some carrion bird. Caleb," an older woman in black touched his arm. "The girl didn't know. It's not her fault." He shrugged her off violently. "I said get out. Samuel, take her back to town. Mr. Drummond." Lena's voice rang clear across the yard, making everyone turn. "I signed a contract. I traveled 3,000 miles in good faith. I am deeply sorry for your loss. Truly I am. But I have nothing left in Boston. No money, no family, no position. If you send me away, you condemn me to the streets." Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps a recognition of shared desperation. But his jaw remained set. "You can't stay here. It isn't proper." "Then let me work." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I can cook, clean, sew. I'll sleep in the barn if need be. Just, please, don't send me away with nothing." The mourners whispered among themselves. Caleb stared at her for a long moment. This unexpected woman in her travel-stained dress, chin raised despite her evident fear. "The old bunkhouse," he said finally, his voice thick. "You can stay there, temporarily, until you find other arrangements. But you're not my wife, you understand? You're nothing to me." He turned and strode back into the house, leaving Lena standing in the dusty yard surrounded by strangers. The woman who had spoken, Mrs. Henderson, she later learned, from a neighboring ranch, patted her arm sympathetically. "Come, dear, let's get you settled. Tomorrow we bury Rachel, and then we'll see what God has planned." As Samuel carried her trunk to a small, weathered building behind the main house, Lena caught a last glimpse of Caleb through the window. He stood beside the coffin, his hand resting on the pine wood, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. That night, lying on a narrow cot in the musty bunkhouse, listening to coyotes howl in the darkness, Lena wondered what she had done. She had fled one disaster only to land in another. Through the thin walls, she could hear the mourners singing hymns, their voices carrying across the prairie wind. She pulled her mother's shawl tighter around her shoulders and closed her eyes, trying not to think about the angry, broken man who was supposed to have been her husband, or the dead woman in the coffin who had held the place she'd traveled so far to claim. Tomorrow, they would put Rachel Drummond in the ground. And then, somehow, Lena would have to find a way to survive in this harsh, unforgiving land where she was neither wife nor widow, but something in between, a ghost of a promise that could never be kept. The morning of Rachel Drummond's funeral dawned gray and cold, with clouds hanging low over the prairie like a shroud. Lena woke to the sound of wagon wheels and muted voices as neighbors arrived to pay their respects. She dressed in her darkest dress, the same travel-worn black that had brought her here, and ventured outside. The cemetery sat on a small rise overlooking the ranch, marked by a handful of weathered crosses and stones. Lena hung back at the edge of the gathering, an outsider among the tight-knit ranching community. Caleb stood at the graveside, rigid as granite, his face a mask that betrayed nothing. The preacher's words were snatched away by the wind, but Lena caught fragments about dust and resurrection. After the burial, the mourners returned to the house for the funeral meal. Lena helped in the kitchen, grateful for something to do with her hands. The ranch women eyed her with curiosity and suspicion, whispering behind their hands. She caught enough words to understand. Mail-order bride. Shameless. Poor Rachel not even cold. Don't mind them, said Mrs. Morrison, Samuel's wife, as she handed Lena a stack of plates. Folk here are slow to accept strangers. You just keep your head down and work hard. They'll come around. But Caleb didn't come around. For 2 weeks, he moved through the ranch like a ghost, speaking to her only when absolutely necessary. He rose before dawn, worked until after dark, and often didn't return to the house at all, sleeping in the barn or out on the range. When their paths did cross, he looked through her as if she were invisible. Lena threw herself into work. She scrubbed floors, mended fences, fed chickens, and helped Mrs. Morrison with the cooking. The bunkhouse was cold and lonely, but she made it habitable, patching the worst gaps in the walls and sewing curtains from feed sacks. At night, she wrote in the journal she'd started on the train, recording her observations of this strange new life. "The silence here is different from city silence," she wrote. "It has weight and presence, broken only by wind and cattle and the distant howl of wolves. Mr. Drummond continues to avoid me. I wonder sometimes if I'm truly here, or if I died somewhere on that endless train journey and this is my purgatory." One evening, as she carried water from the well, she heard a crash from the main house, through the kitchen window. She saw Caleb slumped at the table, a bottle of whiskey beside him, and broken glass scattered on the floor. Against her better judgment, she went inside. He looked up at her with bloodshot eyes, swaying in his chair. "You're still here?" "Yes, Mr. Drummond." "Why?" The word came out slurred but forceful. "Why won't you leave?" "I told you I have nowhere else to go." He laughed bitterly, pouring another drink with unsteady hands. "Nowhere to go. Story of my life." He stared into the amber liquid. "You know what she said to me, Rachel, that last night?" Lena remained silent, sensing he needed to speak more than he needed an answer. "Said she felt trapped, like a bird in a cage. Said this ranch was killing her soul." His voice cracked. "I told her she was being dramatic. Told her to stop reading those foolish novels and appreciate what she had. Then she rode out into that storm." He grabbed the bottle and hurled it against the wall, where it exploded in a shower of glass and whiskey. Lena flinched, but didn't retreat. "She died hating me," he said, his voice raw. "And the worst part? She was right. I trapped her here. I killed her sure as if I'd pushed her off that horse." "You didn't kill her, Mr. Drummond. It was an accident." "Was it?" He looked at her then, really looked at her for the first time since she'd arrived. "Sometimes I wonder if she meant to." The unfinished thought hung between them like a blade. Lena began quietly cleaning up the broken glass, and he didn't stop her. When she'd finished, she made coffee, strong and black, and set it before him. "Drink this." He obeyed mechanically, and gradually some clarity returned to his eyes. They sat in silence as the lamp burned low, two strangers bound by circumstance and grief. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "about how I've treated you. It's not your fault that—" He gestured vaguely. "None of this is your fault. I understand, Mr. Drummond. Grief makes us do things we wouldn't normally do." He studied her face in the lamplight. "You speak as if you know." "I do." She hesitated, then continued. "I lost someone too, not a spouse, but someone, and afterward, I made choices I wouldn't have made otherwise. That's how I ended up answering your advertisement." Something shifted in the air between them. A recognition of shared pain, perhaps. But then Caleb stood abruptly, the moment broken. "You should go back to your quarters. People will talk if they see you here at this hour." As she reached the door, he called after her. "Miss Whitmore, the main house needs tending. If you're willing, you could work here during the days. The pay won't be much, but it's better than nothing." "Thank you, Mr. Drummond. I accept." From that night forward, their arrangement settled into an uneasy routine. Lena arrived each morning to prepare breakfast, maintained the house throughout the day, and returned to the bunkhouse at sunset. Caleb kept his distance, but she felt his eyes on her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking. A puzzled, almost fearful expression, as if she were a problem he couldn't solve. She found traces of Rachel throughout the house. Hair ribbons and drawers, a half-finished embroidery project, books with turned-down pages, in what had been Rachel's sewing room. Lena discovered a cache of letters tied with ribbon, not love letters, but correspondence with a cousin in Denver, full of complaints about the isolation, the hard work, the endless wind. I dream of theaters and gas lights and proper streets. Rachel had written. Instead, I have dust and cattle and a husband who loves this land more than he'll ever love me. One afternoon, while beating rugs on the porch, Lena noticed Caleb standing by the corral, staring at nothing. His horse, a big bay gelding, nuzzled his shoulder, but he didn't respond. She hated it here, he said when he noticed her watching. I knew it, but I thought if I worked hard enough, built it up enough, she'd learn to love it like I do. Not everyone is made for this life, Lena said carefully. But you are. It wasn't a question. I've watched you these past weeks. You don't complain about the work or the isolation. You don't flinch at the hardships. I've known worse hardships than honest work and open sky. Mr. Drummond. He turned to face her fully then, seeing her not as an inconvenience or a reminder of his failures, but as herself, a woman who had chosen to stay when she could have begged charity from the church and found a way back east. Caleb, he said suddenly. My name is Caleb. If you're going to stay, you should call me by my name. It was a small thing, but it felt like a bridge being built across the chasm between them. That night, for the first time, he invited her to take supper at the main house instead of carrying a plate back to the bunkhouse. They ate in companionable silence, and afterward he showed her the ranch ledgers. Can you cipher? Rachel never had a head for numbers. I can. My father was a shopkeeper. I kept his books. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, the first she'd seen. Then perhaps you could help me with these. I'll pay extra, of course. As she bent over the ledgers, calculating feed costs and cattle prices, she felt something ease in her chest. This wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd answered that advertisement, but perhaps it was the life she needed. And perhaps, though she hardly dared think it, it was the life Caleb needed too. Outside. The wind howled across the prairie, but inside the lamplight was warm and golden. And for the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Lena didn't feel quite so alone. The October morning started like any other, with Lena hauling water from the creek for the weekly washing. The sun painted the grasslands gold, and she hummed quietly as she worked, finding peace in the rhythm of frontier life. She'd grown stronger these past weeks, her hands roughened by lye soap and rope, her skin kissed brown by the prairie sun. She was bent over the washboard, scrubbing one of Caleb's work shirts, when a shadow fell across her. Looking up, she found Jake Hawkins looming over her, a ranch hand from the double bar spread who'd been eyeing her at the general store the previous week. Well, the Drummond widow's mail-order girl, all alone by the creek. His breath reeked of rot-gut whiskey, though it wasn't yet noon. I'm working. Mr. Hawkins, please leave me be. Working, he laughed unpleasantly. That what you call it? Heard tell you're warming more than Drummond's house these days. Lena stood, gripping the wet shirt like a weapon. You're drunk. Go home. Don't think I will. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her close. Been too long since I had a woman, and you ain't exactly respectable, are you? Coming here to marry a man whose wife ain't even cold. The crack of a rifle shot split the air. Jake released her and spun around to find Caleb on horseback, Winchester aimed at his chest. Step away from her. Hawkins. Now, Drummond. I wasn't doing nothing. Step away. Jake raised his hands and backed up, but his whiskey courage made him bold. Just having a conversation with your hired girl? Though I guess she's more than that now, ain't she? Whole town's talking about how fast you replaced Rachel. Caleb dismounted in one fluid motion and hit Jake with the rifle butt, sending him sprawling. Then he was on him, fists flying, the two men rolling in the dirt like animals. Lena screamed for them to stop, but the blood rage had taken Caleb. He pounded Jake until the man's face was a bloody mess. Caleb! She grabbed his raised fist. Stop! You'll kill him! He froze, chest heaving, knuckles split and bleeding. Jake groaned and rolled onto his side, spitting blood and teeth. "You get off my land," Caleb growled. "You come near her again. I'll put you in the ground. You hear me?" Jake stumbled to his feet and lurched away, leaving a trail of blood in the dust. Caleb remained kneeling, his whole body trembling with leftover fury. Lena knelt beside him, gently taking his damaged hands in hers. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." "No, you're not. Come to the house. Let me tend to these." He let her lead him like a child, docile now that the violence had passed. In the kitchen, she pumped water and began cleaning his wounds. He winced, but didn't pull away. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. "He wasn't worth it. He touched you." His voice was raw. "He had no right. People will talk more now. They'll say, let them say what they want." He caught her hand, stilling her ministrations. "Lena, Their eyes met and held. She became acutely aware of his thumb stroking across her palm, of how close they sat, of the blood still singing in her veins from fear and something else. "You defended me," she whispered. "No one's ever. You're under my protection. I failed Rachel, but I won't fail you." The mention of his dead wife should have broken the spell, but somehow it only intensified it. Lena found herself leaning closer, drawn by something stronger than wisdom or propriety. Caleb's free hand rose to cup her cheek, his touch impossibly gentle after such violence. "We shouldn't," she breathed, even as she tilted her face into his palm. "No," he agreed, but he was leaning in too. And then his lips were on hers. The kiss was desperate, hungry, full of grief and loneliness and need. Lena's hands tangled in his hair, and he pulled her closer, crushing her against his chest. For a moment, the world disappeared. No ghosts, no judgment, no propriety. Just two broken souls finding solace in each other. Then Caleb wrenched himself away, stumbling backward. No, I can't. Rachel!" "Caleb!" "This is wrong. You should go." He turned away, gripping the table edge. "Please, just go." Lena fled to the bunkhouse, her lips still burning, her whole body shaking. She pressed her fingers to her mouth, tasting blood from where their teeth had clashed. What had she done? What had they done? That night, she lay sleepless, reliving every second. The fury in Caleb's eyes when he'd seen Jake grabbing her, the gentleness when he'd let her tend his wounds, the kiss that had set her soul on fire. She heard footsteps outside and tensed, but it was only Samuel. "Miss Lena, you all right? Caleb told me what happened with Jake." "I'm fine. Mr. Morrison." "Good. That's good. Just wanted you to know. Jake's been run off the double bar. Word is he's heading to California. You won't have no more trouble from him." After Samuel left, Lena allowed herself to cry, for the fear, for the kiss, for the impossibility of it all. She'd come here to be a wife and found herself something else entirely. Neither servant nor spouse, but something undefined and dangerous. The next morning, she found a note slipped under her door in Caleb's rough handwriting. "Take the day off." See, but she went to the main house anyway, finding him at breakfast, staring into his coffee cup like it held answers. "We need to talk about what happened," she said. "Nothing happened." "Caleb, nothing happened," he repeated forcefully. "I lost my temper with Jake. I was out of line. It won't happen again." "And the other thing?" He finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes took her breath away. "I can't betray her. Lena, she's barely 2 months in the ground. What kind of man would that make me?" "A human one," she said softly. "A lonely one, just like me." He stood abruptly, chair scraping. "I need to check the herd." But as he passed her, he paused, his hand hovering near her shoulder without quite touching. "Thank you," he said roughly. "For understanding, for staying, for—" He shook his head and left, taking all the warmth from the room. That afternoon, while hanging laundry, Lena was approached by 3 women from town, the banker's wife, the minister's wife, and Mrs. Garrett, who ran the boarding house. Their faces were pinched with disapproval. "Miss Whitmore." The banker's wife began. "We've come to discuss your situation." "My situation? Living here unchaperoned with Mr. Drummond. It's highly improper. I live in the bunkhouse, not the main house." "Nevertheless," the minister's wife interjected, "it gives the appearance of impropriety, and after that disgraceful display with Jake Hawkins, when a drunk man attacked me, a man was nearly beaten to death because of you." "Mrs." Garrett said coldly, "you're a disruption to our community. It would be best for everyone if you moved to town. I have a room available. I work here. Mr. Drummond needs—" "What Mr. Drummond needs," the banker's wife interrupted, "is time to properly mourn his wife without the distraction of a young woman. If you had any decency, you'd see that." Lena lifted her chin. "I'll discuss it with Mr. Drummond when he returns." The women exchanged meaningful looks. "You do that," the minister's wife said, "and pray on it. Miss Whitmore, ask the Lord to guide you away from temptation." They swept away in a rustle of righteous skirts, leaving Lena trembling with anger and hurt. She was still standing there when Caleb returned at sunset. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, reading her face. She told him about the women's visit. His expression darkened with each word. "Pack your things," he said when she finished. Her heart plummeted. "You're sending me away." "What? No." He looked genuinely shocked. "You're moving into the main house. If they want to talk, let them talk about that. I won't have you bullied by a bunch of gossips." "Caleb, that will only make things worse." "I don't care." He stepped closer, and for a moment she thought he might touch her again. "You've stood by me when you had every reason to leave. I won't throw you to the wolves now. You'll take Rachel's sewing room. It's yours for as long as you want it. People will say—" "Let them say it." His jaw set stubbornly. "I'm tired of living for what people might say. Rachel did that, always worrying about appearances, about what was proper. Look where it got us." That night, Lena moved her few possessions into the main house. The sewing room was small but comfortable. With a window overlooking the eastern hills, she found herself fingering the quilts Rachel had started but never finished, wondering about the woman whose ghost haunted them both. As she unpacked, she heard Caleb's footsteps pause outside her door. For a long moment, he stood there, and she held her breath. Then his steps continued down the hall to his own room, and she heard his door close firmly. But she'd seen the way he'd looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, felt the tremor in his hands when they'd kissed. The wall between them was crumbling, brick by brick, and she didn't know whether to shore it up or help tear it down. Living under the same roof changed everything and nothing. They moved around each other like dancers who'd forgotten the steps, careful not to touch, not to linger too long in the same room. Yet Lena felt Caleb's presence constantly, heard his footsteps in the hall at night, caught his scent of leather and sage on the shirts she washed, found herself setting his coffee just the way he liked it without thinking. The first week of November brought an early snowstorm that trapped them inside for 3 days. They worked separately at first, Caleb repairing tack in the barn, Lena mending and baking in the kitchen. But by the second evening, the isolation became unbearable, and he joined her by the fire. "My mother used to say storms were God's way of making us slow down," he said, staring into the flames. "Mine said they were tests of character." Lena set aside her sewing. "Though I think she just meant we'd show our true selves when we couldn't escape each other." A rueful smile touched his lips. Rachel hated being snowed in, said it made her feel buried alive. The smile faded. "I'm doing it again. Comparing you to her, I'm sorry. Don't apologize. She was your wife. It's natural to—" "No." He turned to face her. "It's not fair to you. You're not Rachel. You're nothing like her. And I need to stop." "Stop what?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "Stop feeling guilty that I'm glad you're not her. Stop hating myself for noticing how you hum when you work, or how you bite your lip when you're concentrating on the ledgers. Stop pretending I don't—" He cut himself off, jaw clenching. Lena's heart raced. "Caleb, I dream about you." The confession came out rough, almost angry. I close my eyes and see you by the creek that day, your hair in the sunlight. I wake up reaching for you. It's been barely 3 months since Rachel died. And He stood abruptly. I'm going to check the stock. In a blizzard. But he was already pulling on his coat, desperate to escape. Lena followed him to the door. You'll freeze out there. Caleb, please. He whirled on her. What do you want from me? Lena, you look at me with those eyes, and I can't think straight. I'm trying to do the right thing here. The right thing for who? For Rachel? She's gone. For the town gossips? They'll talk regardless. When do you do the right thing for yourself? You don't understand. Then help me understand. She grabbed his arm. Talk to me. Stop running away every time you feel something. He stared down at her hand on his sleeve, then slowly, deliberately, covered it with his own. You want to understand? Fine. Rachel and I, our marriage was dying long before she did. We hadn't been intimate in months. She could barely stand for me to touch her. Said I was too rough, too demanding, too much like the land I loved more than her. Lena's breath caught at the raw pain in his voice. The night she died, we fought. She'd been writing to her cousin about leaving, about getting a divorce. I found the letters and confronted her. I said things, terrible things, told her she was weak, spoiled, that she'd never make it without me. His grip on her hand tightened. She said she'd rather die than spend another winter here with me. Then she rode out into that storm, and she did die. So tell me, Lena, how do I let myself feel anything for you when I killed the last woman who made the mistake of marrying me? You didn't kill her. Lena reached up with her free hand to touch his face. Caleb, you didn't kill her. Didn't I? He leaned into her touch despite himself. My love was a prison to her. What if I do the same to you? I'm not her, Lena said firmly. I chose this life. I choose it every day I stay here. Not because I have nowhere else to go anymore. I've saved enough wages now to leave if I wanted. I stay because I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them like crystal, fragile and perfect. Because when you smile, really smile, it's like sunrise. Because you're gentle with the horses and fair with the hands, and you work until your body breaks rather than let anyone down. Because you're a good man who's convinced himself he's a monster. He made a sound, half laugh, half sob, and pulled her against him. This kiss was different from their first, less desperate but more dangerous. When they broke apart, both were trembling. I'm scared, he admitted. I'm scared I'll fail you too. Then we'll be scared together. She took his hand and led him back to the fire. But no more running. Promise me. I promise. They sat together on the settee, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Outside, the storm raged. But inside their circle of firelight, something new and tender was taking root. The next morning brought clear skies and a transformed landscape. Everything sparkled under fresh snow, pristine and new. Caleb found Lena making breakfast and wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing a kiss to her neck. Good morning, he murmured. She leaned back into him. Good morning. It was such a simple exchange, but it felt monumental, an acknowledgement of what they were becoming to each other. They worked side by side that day, digging out from the storm, and every accidental touch sent sparks through her. That evening, as Lena prepared for bed, she heard Caleb's footsteps pause outside her door. Her pulse quickened. After a long moment, he knocked softly. Come in. He stood in the doorway, barefoot and in his nightshirt, looking younger and more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. I can't sleep, he said simply. She held out her hand. Then don't. He crossed to her slowly, as if still fighting himself. When he took her offered hand, his was shaking. Lena, I need you to know, I may not be good at this, at being gentle, at saying the right things. Rachel said I was too. Shh. She pressed her fingers to his lips. No more, Rachel. This is just us. He kissed her fingers, then her palm, then pulled her into his arms. When their lips met, all hesitation vanished. The kiss deepened, hands roaming, bodies pressing closer. Lena felt herself being walked backward toward the bed, and a thrill of anticipation shot through her. "Are you sure?" he asked, pulling back to search her face. "I've never been more sure of anything." What followed was a reverent exploration, a communion of souls as much as bodies. Caleb's hands shook as he unpinned her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. "So beautiful," he breathed. "Lena, you're so beautiful." She helped him with the buttons of his nightshirt, marveling at the solid strength of him. His skin was marked by years of hard work, scars from barbed wire, from horse hooves, from all the battles the land demanded. She traced each one like a map of his life. When they came together at last, it was with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. He was so careful with her, so intent on her pleasure, that she understood Rachel had been wrong. This wasn't a man who was too rough or demanding. This was a man who'd been dying of thirst in his own marriage, who gave everything and received nothing in return. Afterward, they lay entwined, sweat cooling on their skin. Caleb traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, seeming amazed that he was allowed to touch her. "I love you," he said quietly. "I think I have since that day you stood in my yard and refused to be sent away. You were so fierce, so strong. Nothing like—" He caught himself and smiled ruefully. "There I go again." "Old habits," she said, understanding. "It's all right. We have time." He pulled her closer. All the time in the world. But even as she drifted off to sleep in his arms, Lena felt a whisper of unease. They'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And in a small town where gossip traveled faster than wildfire, there would be consequences. She thought of the women who'd come to warn her away, of the judgment in their eyes. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of a man who saw her truly, who needed her as desperately as she needed him. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would weather them together. The candle guttered and died, leaving them in darkness lit only by moonlight on snow. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, but Lena felt no fear. She was home. The stranger arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. When the November sun cast long shadows across the ranch, Lena was in the garden, pulling the last of the root vegetables before the ground froze solid. When she heard the approaching hoofbeats, a man in a city suit rode up the main path, looking distinctly out of place on his rented horse. "Mrs. Drummond?" He dismounted awkwardly, dust already coating his polished boots. "I'm Miss Whitmore," she corrected, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Drummond is out with the herd." "Ah." He produced a leather card case. "Elias Crane, attorney at law, from Cheyenne. I'm here on a matter concerning the late Mrs. Rachel Drummond." Ice formed in Lena's stomach. "Perhaps you should wait for Mr. Drummond to return. Perhaps, but since you're here—" His smile was sharp as a blade. "You are the woman who came to marry Mr. Drummond, are you not? Arrived just after poor Rachel's tragic accident. I fail to see how that's your concern, Mr. Crane." "Oh, but it is. You see, I represent certain interests, family interests, regarding Rachel's estate." He pulled papers from his saddlebag. "Rachel Drummond had property rights that may surprise you." Before Lena could respond, Caleb rode in with Samuel and 2 other hands. His face darkened when he saw the visitor. "Crane." The name came out like a curse. "What are you doing on my land?" "Hello, Caleb. I see you remember me." Elias's smile widened. "Though the last time we met, I was simply Rachel's cousin from Cheyenne. Now I'm here in a more official capacity. Get off my property." "Not until you've seen these." Elias held out the papers. "Rachel left a will, Caleb, signed and witnessed. In the event of her death, half this ranch passes to her nearest blood relative. That would be me." Caleb dismounted slowly, dangerously. "You're lying. The documents are all legal, filed with the territorial court 2 months before her death." Elias's eyes glittered with satisfaction. She came to me last summer, said she was desperately unhappy, said she wanted to ensure her family retained some claim to the property her dowry helped purchase. Her dowry bought cattle, not land. This ranch was mine before we married. Ah, but the improvements made during your marriage, the new barn, the expanded house, the additional grazing rights, those were marital property. Wyoming Territory is quite progressive in its marriage laws. As I'm sure you know, women have property rights here. Caleb snatched the papers, scanning them with growing fury. Lena moved closer, reading over his shoulder. The legal language was complex, but the intent was clear. Rachel had indeed signed away rights to half the ranch's assets. She never said anything. Caleb muttered. Never mentioned. Well, she wouldn't. Would she? Poor Rachel was frightened of you. She told me how controlling you were, how jealous, how you flew into rages. Elias's gaze slid to Lena. And now, so soon after her death, you've already installed a new woman. Some might find that suspicious. You bastard. Caleb lunged forward, but Samuel caught his arm. That's what he wants. Boss, don't give him ammunition. Elias straightened his jacket. I'll be staying in town while we sort this out. The court date is set for next month. Until then, I'd advise against disposing of any assets. Good day. After he left, Caleb stood frozen, still gripping the papers. Lena touched his arm gently. We'll fight this. He can't just... Can't he? Caleb's voice was hollow. Look at how this appears. My wife dies in a suspicious accident, and weeks later I've taken up with the woman who came to replace her. Any judge will see the truth if we present it properly. Caleb, look at me. She waited until his eyes met hers. We'll hire our own lawyer. We'll gather witnesses who knew Rachel, who knew your marriage. We'll fight. That night, unable to sleep, Lena went to Rachel's sewing room, her room now, though she rarely used it anymore, preferring to share Caleb's bed. Something nagged at her about Elias's visit, about his oily confidence. She lit a lamp and began going through Rachel's things more carefully than she had before. In a hidden compartment of the writing desk, she found them. Letters, but not the ones to her cousin she'd seen before. These were love letters, written in a masculine hand. My darling Rachel, one began. Each day apart from you is agony. Soon we'll be together as God intended, free from the brute who holds you captive. The letters were signed, Your devoted E. Elias. Rachel had been having an affair with her own cousin. Lena's hands trembled as she read letter after letter, each more passionate than the last. They spoke of plans to run away, of dreams of life in San Francisco, of the fortune Elias expected to inherit from his father's shipping business. And then, in the final letter, dated just a week before Rachel's death, if you cannot find the courage to leave him, then we must consider other options. The will you signed ensures that even if something happens, I will have claim to what is rightfully ours. Trust me, my love. One way or another, we will be together. Lena sank into a chair, mind racing. Should she show these to Caleb? The pain of discovering his wife's betrayal might destroy him. But if she didn't, Elias might steal everything Caleb had worked for. A floorboard creaked, and she looked up to find Caleb in the doorway, fully dressed despite the late hour. Couldn't sleep either. He noticed the letters in her hands. What are those? She silently handed them over, watching his face change as he read. The color drained from his cheeks, then flooded back in a wave of rage. She was leaving me for him, her own cousin. He laughed bitterly. God, what a fool I was. All those times she went to visit her sick aunt in Cheyenne. Caleb, this is proof that Elias manipulated her. That will was part of their plan to what? Steal from me? Kill me? He crumpled the letters in his fist. Maybe she was riding to meet him that night. Maybe the accident was just that, an accident that ruined their plans. Lena rose and took his face in her hands. Listen to me. Whatever Rachel did, whoever she was, it doesn't matter now. What matters is protecting what's yours. These letters prove Elias acted in bad faith. No judge would uphold that will knowing about their relationship. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I can't believe all that time, pretending, lying. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you have to learn about it this way. Are you? Or are you glad to know she was as miserable as I was? He pulled back to look at her, his eyes tortured. What kind of man am I that I'm almost relieved? My wife is dead, and I'm relieved she was planning to leave me anyway. You're human, Lena said firmly. And you're allowed to feel however you feel. But right now, we need to focus on Elias. The next morning, they rode to town together. The damning letters secured in Caleb's saddlebag. The lawyer they consulted. A sharp old fox named Jeremiah Morton. Read through everything with increasing interest. This certainly changes things. He mused. A relationship between beneficiary and testator of this nature. Yes, we can argue undue influence. Fraud, possibly even conspiracy. Then we can win, Caleb asked. I believe so, but Mr. Crane won't give up easily. He's already been spreading talk around town, painting you in an unflattering light. The fact that Miss Whitmore here is living at the ranch, we'll be married by the time this comes to court, Caleb said suddenly. Lena turned to stare at him. They'd spoken of marriage in vague future terms, but nothing concrete. Caleb, I mean it. He took her hand. I know this isn't the proposal you deserve, but I want you as my wife. Lena. Not because of what people think, not because of the case, but because I love you, because you've brought light back into my life when I thought I'd live in darkness forever. Mr. Drummond, the lawyer interrupted delicately. While touching, I should point out that marrying so soon after your wife's death might actually prejudice the court against. I don't care, Caleb said fiercely. Let them think what they want. I won't hide what Lena means to me. Not anymore. Lena squeezed his hand. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. Morton sighed. Very well. But might I suggest a quiet ceremony? No need to fuel more gossip than necessary. They were married 3 days later in the ranch house, with only Samuel and his wife as witnesses. Lena wore her best dress, the blue one she'd saved for special occasions, and Caleb picked the last of the autumn wildflowers for her bouquet. It wasn't the wedding either had imagined. But when he slipped his mother's ring onto her finger and promised to love and cherish her, Lena felt more complete than she ever had. That night, as they lay together as husband and wife, Caleb traced the ring on her finger. I'm sorry it had to be this way. You deserved a proper wedding, a celebration. I don't need any of that, she assured him. I only need you. But even as they lost themselves in each other, both knew the real battle was just beginning. Elias Crane was still out there, plotting and scheming. The town was still gossiping. And somewhere in the back of Lena's mind, a small voice wondered if Rachel's death had truly been an accident, or if Elias's plans had been even darker than his letters revealed. The poison Elias Crane spread through Redemption Creek was more insidious than any rattlesnake venom. Within days of their marriage, Lena couldn't walk through town without feeling the weight of hostile stares and hearing whispers that ceased the moment she drew near. At the general store, Mrs. Patterson served her with lips pursed so tight they nearly disappeared, while other customers stepped back as if she carried some contagion. That's the one, she heard a woman murmur. Married him before his wife was cold in the ground. Mark my words. There's something unnatural about it all. Elias held court at the hotel saloon each evening, buying drinks and spinning tales. Poor Rachel. He'd sigh to anyone who'd listen. She wrote me about her fears, said Caleb had a terrible temper, said she was afraid for her life. And now look, dead in a convenient accident. And he's already got her replacement warming his bed. The stories grew with each telling. By week's end, people were saying Caleb had been carrying on with Lena before Rachel died, that perhaps the fall from the horse hadn't been what killed her, that maybe the new Mrs. Drummond had helped arrange the first Mrs. Drummond's demise. Caleb bore it with jaw-clenched silence, but Lena saw how it ate at him. He'd come home covered in dust and sweat, having worked himself to exhaustion, trying to outrun the whispers. She'd catch him staring at nothing, hands clenched into fists. "Let me go to town alone from now on," he said one evening after she'd returned from a particularly hostile encounter at the post office. "No." She unpinned her hat with steady hands, though inside she was shaking. "I won't hide. That's what he wants, to isolate us, make us look guilty. You didn't sign up for this, Lena. I signed up for you. For better or worse. Remember?" He pulled her close, pressing his lips to her hair. "I don't deserve you. Stop that." She tilted her head back to look at him. "We're going to fight this, and we're going to win." But their determination was tested the next Sunday. They'd avoided church since their marriage, but Lena insisted they attend. "We have nothing to be ashamed of," she said, pinning her best brooch to her collar. The moment they entered the small wooden church, conversations died. Every head turned. Some faces showed curiosity, others disgust. But none offered welcome. They took a seat in an empty pew near the back, and the families nearby shifted away. Reverend Mills, normally a fair man, seemed to aim his sermon directly at them. He spoke of adultery, of covetousness, of those who built happiness on the graves of others. Each word fell like a stone. Lena kept her chin high, but she felt Caleb trembling with suppressed rage beside her. When the service ended, they tried to leave quickly, but found their path blocked by a cluster of townswomen led by Mrs. Garrett from the boarding house. "Have you no shame?" she hissed. "Sitting in God's house, flaunting your sin?" "We've committed no sin," Lena said quietly. "We're legally and properly married." "Legal isn't the same as moral." "Mrs." Garrett's eyes glittered with righteous fury. "That poor woman isn't 3 months dead, and here you are, wearing her ring, sleeping in her bed." "Enough." Caleb's voice cut like a whip. "You want to judge us? Fine. But Rachel made her choices too. Ask her devoted cousin about those choices. Ask him what kind of letters she was writing him while she was still my wife." The women exchanged uncertain glances. This was clearly news to them. "Lies," someone muttered. "Trying to slander the dead to justify himself." They pushed past the crowd and made it to their wagon. But not before Lena heard someone say, "Maybe they both wanted her gone. Maybe they planned it together." That night, she found Caleb in the barn, taking out his frustrations on a pile of wood that needed splitting. He'd removed his shirt despite the cold, and sweat gleamed on his back as he swung the axe with violent precision. "You'll exhaust yourself," she said. He didn't stop. "Better than riding into town and putting a bullet in Elias Crane." "Caleb, they think I killed her." The axe bit deep into wood. "My own wife. They think I'm capable of that. They don't know you." "Don't they?" He finally stopped, chest heaving. "I was angry with her. I resented her. When she died, part of me was, God help me, part of me was relieved. What kind of man does that make me?" Lena approached slowly, as one might approach a wounded animal. "It makes you honest. Marriages fail. Caleb, people fall out of love. It's tragic, but it's not criminal. Tell that to them." He gestured toward town. "In their eyes, I'm already guilty, and I've made you guilty by association." "Stop!" She grabbed his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I chose this. I chose you. And I would choose you again, even knowing what we'd face." He crushed her against him, heedless of the sweat and sawdust. "I love you," he said roughly. "Whatever happens, know that I love you more than I thought possible." They were still embracing when they heard the shouting. Running outside, they saw an orange glow on the horizon. Fire, coming from the direction of town. "The church," Samuel called, riding up fast. "The church is burning!" They raced to town to find the small wooden structure fully engulfed. The bucket brigade was already forming, but it was clearly too late. The building would be lost. "There!" someone shouted. "It's them! They did this!" Lena turned to find fingers pointing at her and Caleb. The crowd's murmur grew ugly. "Revenge for this morning's sermon," someone said, "trying to burn away their sins. We just arrived." Caleb protested. "How could we have—" "Liar!" A young man pushed forward. "Tom Garrett, the boarding house owner's son. I saw your wife near the church an hour ago. That's impossible, Lena said. I haven't left the ranch all day. I know what I saw. Tom's face was red with excitement and rage. That dark hair, that blue dress. Lots of women have dark hair, Caleb said dangerously. And my wife owns exactly one good dress, which she wore this morning. Unless you're saying she set fire to the church in full daylight while dressed for Sunday service. Maybe she did. Maybe you both did. Maybe this is all part of your plan. The crowd pressed closer, faces twisted with mob fervor. Lena felt real fear for the first time. These people she'd tried so hard to join, to understand. They wanted blood. Enough. The voice that rang out belonged to Judge Harper, the circuit judge who happened to be in town for the upcoming trial. Stand down, all of you. Tom Garrett, did you actually see Mrs. Drummond's face? Tom faltered. Well, no, sir. But the hair and dress could describe half the women in Wyoming. And where's your proof the fire was even set deliberately? Church was old, full of dry wood. Could have been a knocked-over candle, a spark from the stove. Your Honor. Elias Crane emerged from the crowd, expression sorrowful. While I appreciate your call for calm, you must admit the timing is suspicious. My poor cousin's husband, angry at the sermon, taking revenge. I admit nothing without evidence, Judge Harper said sternly. And I'll remind you, Mr. Crane, that spreading unfounded accusations could prejudice your own case. Court's in 2 days. Save your arguments for then. The crowd reluctantly dispersed, though not without muttered threats and dark looks. Judge Harper approached Caleb and Lena. Go home, he said quietly. Stay there until the trial, and get your evidence in order, all of it. This has gotten ugly, and it's going to get uglier. On the ride home, Lena couldn't stop shaking. They wanted to hurt us, our neighbors, people we've known for months. They wanted to hurt us. Fear makes people into monsters, Caleb said grimly. And Elias has made them afraid. Afraid that if I could kill one wife, any of them could be next. Afraid that their whole understanding of their safe little town is wrong. Back at the ranch, they found Samuel and the hands armed and watchful. Figured you might have trouble, Samuel said. We'll keep watch tonight. In their bedroom, Lena finally broke down. The tears came in great, gulping sobs as the terror and frustration of the past weeks crashed over her. Caleb held her, rocking her gently, murmuring soothing words. We could leave, he said suddenly. After the trial, whatever happens, we could sell out and go somewhere new. California, Oregon, anywhere they don't know us. She pulled back to look at him through her tears. Is that what you want? I want you safe. I want you happy. This land. He looked out the window at the moonlit prairie. I've loved this land my whole adult life, but I love you more. No. She wiped her eyes. We're not running. This is our home. We'll face them down, win the trial, and make them see the truth. And if they never accept us? She squared her shoulders. Then we'll live our lives anyway, with or without their approval. He smiled then, the first real smile she'd seen in days. There's my fierce Boston girl, the one who stood in my yard and refused to be sent away. I'm not a Boston girl anymore, she corrected. I'm a Wyoming rancher's wife, and we Wyoming women, we don't back down from a fight. They made love that night with a desperate passion, knowing that tomorrow would bring the trial and whatever judgment, legal or divine, awaited them. Outside. Samuel and the men kept their vigil, rifles ready against the darkness. The church fire smoldered through the night, sending smoke across the prairie like incense from some ancient sacrifice. And in town, Elias Crane smiled in his hotel room, composing the final arguments that would either destroy Caleb Drummond or see his own schemes crumble to ash. The courthouse in Redemption Creek was packed beyond capacity, with people spilling out onto the wooden sidewalks, craning their necks to catch glimpses through the windows. The November air was sharp with frost, but the crowd's heated anticipation created a fog of breath and body heat that rose like steam from a kettle. Lena sat beside Caleb at the defendant's table, her gloved hands folded tightly in her lap. She wore her blue dress, cleaned and pressed to perfection, and her mother's cameo brooch at her throat. Beside her, Caleb looked imposing in his best suit, jaw set with determination. Across the aisle, Elias Crane lounged with the confidence of a card sharp holding aces. He dressed in expensive black, playing the part of the grieving cousin to perfection. Behind him sat a row of townspeople he'd cultivated, those who'd drunk his whiskey and swallowed his lies. Judge Harper called the court to order with sharp raps of his gavel. This hearing will determine the validity of the will presented by Mr. Elias Crane regarding the estate of the late Mrs. Rachel Drummond. Mr. Crane, you may present your case. Elias rose smoothly, every inch the sophisticated city lawyer. Your Honor, the facts are simple. My dear cousin Rachel, fearing for her life in an unhappy marriage, took legal steps to protect her interests. The will I've presented is properly witnessed and filed. She wished to ensure that her family, myself, as her only living relative, would inherit what was rightfully hers should anything happen to her. He paused dramatically. And something did happen to her. A tragic accident that occurred mere weeks before a replacement bride arrived to take her place. Some might call the timing convenient. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Judge Harper gavelled them to silence. Do you have evidence that Mrs. Drummond's death was anything other than accidental, Mr. Crane? I have her letters, Your Honor, letters expressing her fear of her husband's temper, his controlling nature, letters begging me to help her escape. Objection! Jeremiah Morton rose. Mr. Crane speaks of letters but has presented none to the court. Because they were private correspondence, Elias protested. Sacred communications between cousins? Then they're hearsay and inadmissible. Judge Harper ruled. Present evidence or move on. Mr. Crane. Elias's composure cracked slightly. The will itself is evidence enough. Why would a happily married woman make such provisions unless she feared? I'll tell you why. Lena stood suddenly, ignoring Morton's attempt to stop her. Your Honor, I have evidence that explains everything. Judge Harper frowned. Mrs. Drummond, you're not a lawyer in this case. No, but I am a witness to the truth. She pulled out the packet of letters she'd found. These are letters between Elias Crane and Rachel Drummond. Love letters. Your Honor, they prove that the will was part of a scheme between lovers to steal my husband's property. The courtroom exploded. Elias went white, then red. Those are private. You had no right. My client found them among his late wife's effects. Morton said smoothly. They're now part of the estate and perfectly admissible. Judge Harper beckoned. Bring them here. As the judge read, his expression grew increasingly grim. The crowd pressed forward, trying to hear as he read selected passages aloud. My darling Rachel, soon we'll be free to love as God intended. The will ensures our future together. Trust me to handle everything. Mr. Crane. Judge Harper's voice was cold as winter iron. You presented yourself as a concerned cousin. These letters suggest a very different relationship. Rachel and I we had feelings. Yes. Elias tried to recover. All the more reason I wanted to protect her from that brute. Feelings. Caleb spoke for the first time, his voice deadly quiet. You seduced my wife, convinced her to betray her marriage vows, and when she died before you could run off together, you decided to steal what you couldn't charm out of her. Better a thief than a murderer, Elias snarled, mask finally slipping. You killed her. She was leaving you, and you killed her for it. No. A new voice spoke from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned to see Dr. Hawthorne, the territory's medical examiner, making his way forward. I killed her. The silence was absolute. Even Judge Harper seemed frozen. Doctor. Hawthorne reached the front, his aged face drawn with exhaustion. Not directly, of course, but through my negligence. Your Honor, I've ridden 2 days straight to be here because my conscience won't let me stay silent. Explain yourself, Doctor. Judge Harper commanded. I examined Mrs. Rachel Drummond after her accident, The fall from the horse broke her neck. Yes, but there were other factors. She'd been taking laudanum, large doses, regularly. I found the bottles hidden in her saddlebags. The night she died, she'd taken enough to impair her judgment severely, riding in a storm while intoxicated with opiates. He shook his head. I should have reported it immediately. But I thought I wanted to spare her reputation. Spare Mr. Drummond further pain. You're saying she was addicted to laudanum? Morton pressed. Heavily dependent. Yes, I'd been supplying it for her headaches for over a year. Too much, too freely. When I heard Mr. Crane's accusations, I couldn't stay silent. Rachel Drummond's death was a tragic accident, caused by her addiction and impaired state. Nothing more. Elias tried one last gambit. Even so, the will is valid. A will created under undue influence from a man engaged in an adulterous affair with the testator? Judge Harper's gavel came down hard. I think not. This will is declared null and void. Mr. Crane, you're fortunate I don't have you arrested for fraud and attempted theft. I suggest you leave this territory immediately. But Elias, seeing his schemes crumble, turned vicious. You think you've won? You, a murderer and his whore? The whole town knows what you are. Caleb moved so fast, Lena barely saw it. His fist connected with Elias's jaw, sending the man sprawling. This time, no one moved to stop him. Get out, Caleb said quietly. Get out and never come back. If I see you near my wife or my property again, I'll kill you. That's not a threat, it's a promise. Elias scrambled to his feet, blood streaming from his nose, and fled. The courtroom remained silent until Judge Harper cleared his throat. Case dismissed, Mr. and Mrs. Drummond. You're free to go. And folks, he addressed the packed courtroom, I've seen a lot of human ugliness in my years on the bench. Gossip, lies, mob justice. They're poisons that destroy communities. You nearly let an outsider turn you against your neighbors based on nothing but whispers and spite. Think on that. Outside the courthouse, Lena and Caleb stood in the weak November sun, arms around each other, as the crowd dispersed with downcast eyes and mumbled apologies. We won, Lena said softly. The case, yes, but the rest. Caleb looked at the people hurrying away, unable to meet their eyes. Can we really stay here after everything? Before Lena could answer, Mrs. Morrison approached. Samuel's wife, who'd been kind to her from the beginning. Behind her came a small group, the minister, the schoolteacher, a few ranching families. Mr. Drummond, Mrs. Drummond, Mrs. Morrison began, twisting her hands nervously. We owe you an apology. We let fear and lies poison our minds. You've been good neighbors, and we forgot that. We're sorry. Others echoed her words, shamefaced but sincere. Not everyone. Some would never forgive or forget. But enough to begin rebuilding. Thank you, Lena said simply. That means more than you know. As they rode home, Caleb was quiet. Finally, he said, Rachel was taking laudanum for over a year. How did I not know? She hid it well. People in pain often do. All those headaches she complained of. I thought she was being dramatic. I never even tried to understand. He shook his head. I failed her in so many ways. You're human. Caleb, you both were. Two humans who made mistakes, who were wrong for each other. It's tragic, but it's not your fault. That night, as they lay in bed, moonlight streaming through the curtains, Lena traced patterns on Caleb's chest. Do you want to leave? She asked. Start fresh somewhere else? He was quiet so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, no, this is our home. We fought for it, bled for it. I won't let anyone drive us away. Good, because I've been thinking, that empty land by the creek would be perfect for a schoolhouse. The town needs one, and I could teach. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. Have I told you today that I love you? Only a dozen times. Not nearly enough then. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. young Tom Garrett, hat in hand, shuffling his feet on their porch. "Mrs. Drummond, I wanted to apologize about the fire, saying I saw you. I was excited, caught up in the moment. Truth is, I only saw a woman from behind, and I wanted it to be you because it was easier than admitting we don't know who really did it." "Thank you for your honesty." "Tom," he nodded, relief evident. "Ma wanted me to ask. That is, she's hoping you'll still come to the quilting circle. Said the women need someone sensible like you to keep them from gossiping themselves into trouble again." It was an olive branch, tentatively offered. Lena smiled. "Tell your mother I'll be there." As Tom rode away, Caleb wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Look at you, already civilizing the territory. Someone has to." She leaned back against him. "This land needs more than cattle and cowboys. It needs community, connection, hope for something better. And you'll give it that? We will, together." They stood on their porch, looking out over the land they'd nearly lost, to lies, to greed, to the darker impulses of human nature. But they'd survived. More than that, they'd found each other in the ruins of tragedy and built something new and strong. The ranch spread before them in the morning light, vast and challenging and full of promise. Their ranch, their home, their future. Whatever came next, they would face it as they'd faced everything else, together, unafraid, and unashamed of the love that had bloomed in the ashes of grief. Spring arrived in Wyoming like a blessing after the harsh winter, painting the prairie with wildflowers and filling the air with birdsong. The Drummond Ranch bustled with new life, calves in the pasture, chicks in the henhouse, and hope renewed in the hearts of its inhabitants. A year had passed since the trial, since the darkness that nearly consumed them. Now, as Lena stood on the hill overlooking Redemption Creek, she could see the changes their perseverance had wrought. The new schoolhouse stood proud beside the creek, its bell tower reaching toward the endless sky. Children's laughter carried on the wind during recess, a sound that would have been foreign to this land just months ago. "Mrs. Drummond!" Young Annie Morrison came running up the hill, braids flying. "Ma says to tell you the church ladies are ready for you." Lena smiled, smoothing her dress. Today was the spring festival, and she was expected to help judge the pie contest, a far cry from the woman who'd been nearly driven out by those same church ladies. "Tell them I'll be right there, Annie." As the girls scampered off, Lena heard familiar hoofbeats. Caleb rode up, dismounting with the easy grace of a man born to the saddle. He'd been checking the eastern pastures with Samuel, and dust still clung to his clothes. "You clean up nice for a rancher's wife," he said, pulling her close despite her protests about his dusty state. "Caleb, I just pressed this dress." He silenced her with a kiss, deep and lingering. When they parted, she was breathless and no longer cared about wrinkles. "Have I told you today that I love you, Mrs. Drummond?" "Only twice. You're slipping." He grinned, the expression transforming his weathered face. The shadows that had haunted him for so long had finally lifted, replaced by a peace she'd once thought impossible. They walked down to town hand in hand, greeting neighbors who now smiled genuinely at their approach. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. There had been months of careful relationship building, of Lena proving herself through quiet acts of service, of Caleb showing the community the man he truly was beneath the grief and anger. The festival sprawled across the town square, with booths selling everything from preserves to horseshoes. The skeleton of the new church rose behind it all, the community having come together to rebuild what fear and hatred had destroyed. "Lena!" "Mrs." Garrett waved from the pie table. "Thank goodness you're here, Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Patterson are about to come to blows over whose apple pie deserves the blue ribbon." As Lena mediated the great pie debate with diplomatic grace, Caleb found himself pulled into a horseshoe competition with the other ranchers. The easy camaraderie, the good-natured ribbing, it felt like belonging in a way he'd never experienced. Even before Rachel's death. "Your missus has done wonders for this town," said Ben Carter, whose ranch bordered theirs to the north. "That school of hers. My boys actually want to go now. She makes learning seem like an adventure. She has a gift." Caleb agreed, watching Lena laugh at something the minister's wife said. "You both do. Taking in those Wilson orphans when their PA died in that blizzard. Not many would have done that." Caleb thought of 10-year-old Matthew and 8-year-old Sarah, who'd come to them 3 months ago, hollow-eyed and scared. Now they called the ranch home, and just last week, Sarah had shyly asked if she could call Lena Mama. They needed a home. We had room. Ben clapped him on the shoulder. "Like I said, a gift, for building family where there wasn't one before." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Reverend Mills called everyone to gather. The new minister, the old one having moved on after the church fire debacle, was a younger man with kind eyes and an understanding heart. "Before we close our festival, I've been asked to perform a special duty," he announced. Caleb and Lena Drummond were married in haste during a time of trial. They've asked to renew their vows today, surrounded by their community, as a celebration of not just their love, but of healing and redemption. A murmur of surprise and approval rippled through the crowd. Lena and Caleb made their way to the makeshift platform, Sarah and Matthew beside them as attendants. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Mills began, "we gather not to witness a beginning, but to celebrate a love that has been tested by fire and emerged stronger." This time, Lena wore a new dress, white with blue ribbons that matched the Wyoming sky. This time, Caleb's hands didn't shake as he held hers. This time, the crowd watched with joy instead of judgment. "Lena," Caleb said, his voice carrying clear across the square, "you came to me in my darkest hour, when I had nothing to offer but anger and pain. You saw something worth saving. You fought for us when I was too lost to fight for myself. You've given me not just love, but redemption, a reason to wake each morning with hope instead of dread. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand beside you through whatever storms may come. You are my heart, my home, my forever." Lena's eyes shimmered with tears. "Caleb, I came here running from my past, expecting nothing but survival. Instead, I found a love worth fighting for. You've shown me strength I didn't know I possessed, given me a life I never dared dream of. With you, I've learned that home isn't a place, it's the person who holds your heart. I promise to love you, to stand with you, to build our dreams together on this land we both love. You are my choice, my partner, my always." When Reverend Mills pronounced them husband and wife, again, and Caleb kissed her, the crowd erupted in genuine celebration. Even the toughest cowboys wiped their eyes, and the church ladies who'd once scorned her now dabbed at tears with their handkerchiefs. The dancing lasted well into the night. Lena whirled from partner to partner, laughing as ranchers with 2 left feet tried to manage a waltz. But she always returned to Caleb's arms, where she fit perfectly. "No regrets?" he asked during a slower song, holding her close. "Not one," she assured him. "Well, maybe one. I do wish I'd brought more dresses from Boston. The laundry here is murder." He laughed, spinning her. "I'll buy you a dozen dresses. I don't need dresses. I have everything I need." As if to prove her point, Matthew and Sarah ran up, grabbing their hands. "Come see, Mr. Morrison's doing fire tricks." They let the children pull them toward the entertainment, a family formed not by blood but by choice, by love, by the courage to stay when leaving would have been easier. Later, as they rode home under a blanket of stars, the children asleep in the wagon bed, Lena pulled out her journal, the same one she'd started on that long-ago train ride. "Still writing?" Caleb asked. "Our story," she said, "so we never forget where we came from, so the children will know that beautiful things can grow from tragedy." He pulled her closer on the wagon seat. "What's the last line?" She smiled, closing the journal. "I came here to be a wife and found myself instead. Found love, found family, found home. Not in the way I expected, but in the way I needed. The West took everything I thought I was and gave me everything I was meant to be." And so, under the endless Wyoming sky, our real story begins. As they crested the hill toward home, the ranch spread before them in the moonlight, the house with its welcoming windows, the barn and outbuildings, the vast pastures where their future grazed contentedly. It wasn't the life either had planned, but it was the life they'd built together, one choice at a time. "I love you," Caleb said, as he did every day now, making up for all the years he'd forgotten to say such things. "And I love you," Lena replied, as she always would. Behind them, the lights of Redemption Creek twinkled in the distance, a town that had learned, as they had, that redemption wasn't just a name, it was a choice, made daily, to be better than you were before. The coyotes sang their wild song across the prairie, and the wind carried the scent of sage and possibility. And in a house that had once held only sorrow, a family settled in for the night, hearts full of the greatest gift the West could offer, a second chance. Thank you all for listening to this tale of love, loss, and redemption in the Old West. I hope Lena and Caleb's story touched your hearts as much as it touched mine in the telling. Where are you listening to this story from? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from listeners whether you're in bustling cities or quiet countryside, in America or across the oceans. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of courage, romance, and adventure from the American frontier. Share your thoughts about Lena and Caleb's journey. What moments moved you most? Until we meet again around the campfire, may your own trails lead to unexpected blessings. Happy trails, partners.